Hello everybody, how is it going? How is your practice going? Are you finding it easy, difficult? Are you finding these videos interesting and useful? Are you able to use some of these tips for your own practice? Let me know if there's anything I can help you with. Now, today I wanted to focus on something that is quite tricky to practice. It's called phrasing. Musical phrasing or musical phrase. So first of all, we need to think about what does it mean. What is a musical phrase? What is phrasing? What is musicality? So let's start with phrasing. Phrasing is, if we think of a musical phrase, it's the same as a sentence or a normal phrase that we speak. So the phrase starts somewhere and it goes somewhere, and then by the end of the phrase we finish off. And when we speak, we always have a tone. We always kind of try to get somewhere in the phrase and then we lower the voice down to somewhere else. Some phrases might be more complex than others, but in general it just rises and then it goes back down. And that's the main way that we phrase when we speak. The same thing when we do music. We phrase going from small to big and then small. Normally, basically. Sometimes we have questions, and in questions we finish up. Same thing with music, sometimes we might finish up, sometimes we might start with really strong phrase and then it lowers down. So it depends on the phrase, and we need to understand how and where and in which way is the phrase evolving when we play it. This could be for any instrument, it could be also for the voice. So any music that we play, any music that we listen to, will always have some phrasing, which is the way that we try to make sense of those notes. The same way that a sentence is a bunch of words that make sense together, that have a meaning. Same thing with music. We have a bunch of notes instead of words, and to make it as a phrase, we need to make sure that it has a meaning, that from the beginning until the end of that phrase, there is a meaning that goes through. If there is no meaning, it's just lots of notes, and that's quite sad and not very nice to listen to. So let's work on phrasing. I believe phrasing should be always there from the very beginning, even if you're playing just a twinkle, 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 little star, or something really simple. It will always have some phrasing. So if we practice phrasing from the very first piece that we ever played, we will continue that throughout our practice all the time. So phrasing should always be at the back of the mind, even if you're playing something else. But let's start with the most important bits. Now that we know what phrasing is how do we get there? So to start with, we need to have even sound. Now, this might mean different things on different instruments. If it's a piano, it might just be that we have even sound on each finger, so the keys actually go the same way, that it sounds an even sound throughout the notes. If it's a string instrument, especially with a bow, it means that we can play, if I'm choosing one note, even note, an even tone throughout the different notes. It could be just a scale, or just anything. I suggest that we start with scales to practice that. So maybe we can start with one note per scale and try to even each beat. Like I said, if we have a bow, the bow is much heavier on this side than on this side. The tip is always weaker, so we need to compensate for that. So if we're playing this, to make it even, we're going to need to have this lighter at the heel, getting louder, as in getting heavier, sorry, so we keep the same volume. do anything would be... That would be the normal thing for the bow to do. So we need to compensate for that. The other thing we can try is more than one in a bow. So... etc. If you're more advanced, you're going to use also this finger action, flexibility of the fingers, to do the changing of the bows. Much more even. Otherwise, we get that different kind of attack to the note. So we want to use this if we are able to, if we are advanced enough, if we know how to do it. If you're not sure, you can always ask your teachers. But the important thing is, first of all, we can do an even sound. Once we got through the even sound, we can go to the next thing. And the next thing is going to be if we're going to use dynamics, or we're going to use different crescendos and diminuendos, whatever is written in the page that we need to. So for example, if we're going to have a crescendo, it's going to be starting at the tip, which is easier. So right now I'm just using on an A string. Just using the natural way the bow works, as this is much lighter and this is much heavier. Now if we're able to do that, let's try it the other way. This is much more tricky, reversing the bow. So this is light. So we can practice that to get good control of the bow at every end. The other important thing with even notes is that we keep the sound even in different note values. So for example, we have a crotchet, and then we have quavers. Quavers are going to be half the amount of a crotchet. So we keep the same speed of the bow, and we keep the same sound. So we could do it with a scale again. Piece like, for example, long ago in the Suzuki books. To keep that even sound throughout the notes, and so it's the same all the way through. So one of the important things to keep a tone even is how we use the bow on the strings. That's the first thing, and then there's going to be other things that are going to go on top of it. So we're talking about 3 different measurements for bowed string instruments. So that could be violin, viola, cellos, even double bass. One is how heavy we're playing on it. The other one is how fast we play, and the other one is where do we play, whether it's near the bridge, which is a lot harder on the string, or where it's much softer near the fingerboard. So those 3 are going to be the basis of our sound, and then we can build on top of that. Then we can use vibrato, we can use even how much we tilt the bow, and many more things that we can talk about later. But those are the main 3 to start with. The weight, the speed of the bow, and where we play in the string. So we talked about the different positions of the bow. If it's further away from the bridge, we get a very subtle sound. We go near the bridge, we get a much more direct and much stronger sound. In the middle is our normal sound, the basic sound that we want to use in general. So we can go away from that in different ways, depending on where we play with the bow. Remember not to use vibrato when we work on these things, so that we can appreciate how it changes. Also the weight will change. If we're far away from the bridge, we want to use very lightweight and possibly tilting the bow. And if we play near the bridge, we want to probably have a bit stronger, a bit heavier, and full hair. And I'm sure that will be the same for many of the instruments that if you play another instrument, you will see. Now the next stage is understanding where the phrasing is going. So if we have I'm going to play the beginning of La Folia, just because it's quite a simple to understand, it's quite simple to understand the phrasing for this piece. As you can see, it goes higher and higher and higher. When it gets to the top, then it reaches down again. So that's a very common phrasing for many, many pieces. The phrase starts at the very first note and it finishes on the very last note. So we need to make sure that we carry the phrase all the way till the last note, even through the diminuendo at the end. It's not when we finish. We cannot just completely disappear. We need to carry on the sound till the very end. And then we have the same thing, probably if we play in this piece or another piece, we want to do the same but in quiet mode, same thing, near the fingerboard. And we can use this to also work on the crescendo and the diminuendo. If we understand at least the basic phrases, we can then adjust every time, where is this phrase going? So that's the question you should ask yourself. Where is this phrase going? Where's the dynamics going? Are they matching? When the dynamic gets to the top, does it finish or does it continue? Does it get again low and then does it go high again? Or where is it going? So the next thing will be adding the vibrato in and how to use the vibrato to improve this phrasing, not to make it worse. So, vibrato. How can we use vibrato? We can do a narrow vibrato or can we make a wide vibrato? So depending on that, and we can also increase the speed. We can do it slowly or faster. That's a very basic way of explaining vibrato. But those are the main components. So if we're doing a crescendo, for example, we can also do crescendo with the vibrato by getting faster or by getting wider or both. We can just do speed. Or we can just get in wide. In both ways, it helps with the crescendo. Now the other thing with vibrato is it can help us to keep the intensity going even when it gets softer. So for example, if we go back to something La Folia, where at the top we're quite intense, we want to keep the intensity even when it gets. If that's what we wanted to do, we keep intense the vibrato, even if it's small but fast. That will keep the phrase going for a bit longer, even in quiet mode. So, vibrato can help us to follow through the phrase, even when it gets quieter in the dynamic. Finally, we talked about vibrato, we talked about how to use the bow, that's for string instruments. See how it works for your own instrument. If it's not one of those instruments, if it's piano or if it's a wind instrument, how does it work for you? And you might know from your teacher or from your own learning how to use all these tools I've been talking about. Also, think about whatever piece you're playing right now. How can you improve your phrasing? Because every piece will have some phrasing in one way or another. And that's where I'm going next, because sometimes, like I said, it could be very complex. Like it can be a really long phrase and it goes for a really long time if it's very slow, or sometimes if it's, for example, some Baroque piece, it might have different layers. It will have different voices, and we need to make sure that we keep those voices interesting and separate. So they will have different phrasing. For example, if we're going into something like, I think most people would recognize this piece. It's not a continuous line like the other ones. It has different voices, so we need to do... This might be much slower. So this is also phrasing in different ways. It's phrasing in different levels, in different voices, to be able to understand what is going on. So how do we use the bow? How do we use our loud and soft, our weight? How do we use the speed of the bow? This could be a lot more bow. This much smaller, for example. So things like this are also part of phrasing. But they are in a different way, because we have to use phrasing in a completely new level, which is different voices for different things. Other things could be different colors. So we talked about playing at different places. Sometimes we want to have a very quiet. So we need to think, what kind of piece is this? As in, what kind of feeling, what kind of emotion is trying to express? What is the composer trying to express in here? Or in a different way, what do you feel when you listen to this piece? And therefore, how do you make that sound? So imagine in your head what kind of sound you want to get, and then with all the tools that we worked on, how do we make that happen? So that's another level of musicality and phrasing that we need to think about. And that will change the way that we practiced each and every bit of those techniques, because it will be able to put all those things together to make something much more interesting.